Well, g'day and welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast. We are delighted that you have joined us today as we continue to invite, host, welcome church leaders from all over the Aussie church, as well as hearing from voices from around the globe. And of course, the big heart of this podcast is to encourage you where you are at when it comes to church planting, multiplication, disciple making, innovation, whatever that may look like for you as a leader in God's church. We hope that this conversation is going to be an encouragement to you. And today we are joined by a wonderful leader in God's church, all the way from Perth, Western Australia, Dianne Jarvey, who works with the Salvation Army in Australia. Di, it is wonderful to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. I thought I was in trouble there for a minute because you said Dianne, and I was like, oh no, here we go.
I always love to introduce formally to begin with, and now that we're friends, Di.
Now we're relaxed.
Really, yeah, that's why we're relaxed. Well, hey, Di, I'd love, as we do with most of our guests, please just give us a bit of an introduction to who you are. I've said that you're from Perth. Give us a bit of your backstory. Give us a bit of an insight to who you are as a leader and what you're doing, your family, and then we're going to get into some more of our conversation today.
Sure. Cool. Thanks for having me. I love the Exponential network and all that it brings. And so it's great to be part of the family that's in that space today. But I suppose I'm Di. I live in Perth. I'm a Perth girl. I've returned home after travelling around Australia working with the Salvation Army. I'm married for 31 years. I like to say that because I think these days, don't hear that number very often in thing, but I have a fabulous husband, Andrew. And I have two amazing boys, Isaac and Josiah, who are really young men now, but that ages me, so we won't go there. And I've been a Salvation Army officer for 21 years now. Wow. And I've served in 3 different states. And I've been a core leader, which is like a senior pastor or whatever, however you want to equate that, to 4 different churches across Australia. Served as a state youth and children's leader in South Australia. And now I find myself in the mission department, and I don't know if you're supposed to have a favourite role, but this is my favourite role that I'm in right now, serving as the National Faith Community Development Secretary for Australia. So It's such a fun adventure being a Salvation Army officer. You go everywhere, be everywhere, and meet everyone. It's fantastic.
Yes. And what a job title, Di. That sounds like quite a mouthful, but I'm sure we're going to get into more of what that looks like on the ground. But tell us, how did you stumble into the Salvation Army? What's your backstory as you kind of came to faith, joined the Army?
I didn't really stumble. I was born into it, I think. So I know, talk to my parents about that one. Yes. But Salvation Army is my tribe. That's how I like to say it's. We're going to talk about DNA, but I'd question that it's almost in my DNA just because it's just such a unique space. And so born and raised the Salvation Army. So when I felt the call on my life, it just seemed like a natural step to go into officership because this was my tribe and this is my people. And, this is where we're going to travel together in that space. So all my life, really, done that. But before I was an officer, I ran my own business. I am a hairdresser by trade and did home hairdressing for a bit and developed that. So a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit in me there, which fits with the Salvation Army quite well. And so, it's just been around forever, as long as I've been in it. So,
I love it. Well, one of the things that, I guess that, there could be a number of reasons, but I guess the main reason that I was as we've recently met and I've heard some of what is going on in your neck of the woods and particularly some of the movement that's happening within the Salvation Army in Australia, one of the things that I was really intrigued to have you on the podcast today for was particularly, you just named it before, around DNA and around, particularly in your role, one of the things that you have grown increasingly passionate about is helping the Salvation Army to really reclaim that idea of movement. Often in our churches, denominations, networks, even tribes that have once called themselves movements, some of those dynamics of movement maybe are long back, maybe haven't been around for a couple of decades. And I was just so encouraged as you and I connected and hearing some of your journey How about you bring our listeners today in on some of that, as you've helped be part of leading a bit of a new season within the Salvation Army at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting conversation to be having. And I think, it's no secret that the Western church has kind of been in decline for some time. And, there's a lot of negative, negative talk around that and how that feels, and it can make you feel a bit depressing. The Salvation Army is not immune to that. But I think, a couple of years ago, there was this big thing called COVID that kind of made us reset and think. And I think that, the challenge around that is, do we take the lessons from that or do we stall? And so I suppose this got us pondering as an organisation, what does it mean to reclaim, our DNA? What does it mean to do church in this new context and new, environment that we're in? And that sort of led us to find the Movement Leaders Collective. And I know Exponential have done work with Rich Robinson and Alan Hirsch around this. And they talk about movemental DNA, and it's not a new idea. It's actually just core principles from the early church that they've identified happen in every successful movement. So it's taking that early church learning and developing it into our context. And so it's interesting because the Salvation Army has always been a movement and been innovative. I mean, back in 1890, we launched the Limelight Theatre here in Australia and brought movies and film to Australia. And so we were innovative in that. And you can go back to World War I, where we have the donut lassies who were making donuts in soldiers' hats and bring it to the front line. And that was the gospel there. And, the booths from the very beginning have always had the creative juice flowing in the spaces because, the Salvation Army was birthed for the people who didn't fit traditional churches, and they're a meeting point for them to have fullness of life. So creativity, innovation, inclusiveness, meeting social need, that's our DNA. And so I think coming back to that is challenging in this way, but it just sounds like the early church, really.
Yes.
I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And, I think everyone is sort of striving to that, but gets a little bit lost in that.
And as you've rightly said there, that's not dishonouring the past. That's not kind of like, if anything, it's actually going, wow, there was something to be reclaimed in our origins as a movement. And in your role, particularly as that mission specialist, you are one who is, seeking to help culturally curate and catalyse that work across the nation for the Salvation Army. And I guess as you guys had that epiphany in the pandemic, like I'm sure many of us did, it was forced learning. It really caused many of us to kind of do a lot of deep reflection and thinking about our practice. What did that look like for yourself and for the Salvation Army, particularly as you wanted to reclaim that culture of innovation and disciple making within what had potentially become an institutionalized movement?
Yeah. Wow. That is a big question and a big task. And I want to say something first up is that I'm not doing this alone. There's a whole team that's in this. But something that is really true for me is if it doesn't happen in us first, how does it happen anywhere else? And so I feel really strongly in this role because I was a bit overwhelmed by it at first, going, oh, goodness. And I really felt God say to me, be faithful in the little things and I'll give you the big things. But then it's evolved in that being, be faithful in the little things and I'll do the big things with you. Wow. And so it's just sort of evolved. And I suppose we're looking for the early adapters and the innovators, starting at the grassroots. Much of our work happens with church leaders and their teams because that's where we want the impact, is that front line. And so we're kind of just trying to take this long journey with them of the unlearning to help them come back and relearn fresh ways to bring the gospel to their community and seeing where God is already at work and join him there.
Yes.
And I suppose that sounds really simple, but it's a long process. And I love this quote from Alan Hirsch in his book, Forgotten Ways. In every seed is the potential for a tree, and in every tree a potential for a forest. And it all begins with a seed. And so I see my role as we're planting forests. Like, although we're using seeds, right, we're actually planting forests.
That's brilliant.
And that if we just do that little work bit by bit, a forest will happen, but we've just planted the one seed. Does that make sense? It's such a big task. And if you look at it like that in its grandioso, but what can we do? Well, we can do the little things and do the big things we've got. I don't know.
No, that's fantastic, and that's much of that multiplication thinking, isn't it, Di?
Yes.
It's like even while some things may just be small adjustments, they actually can have a really significant impact over time when we continue to come back to that multiplication thinking. And I think you're really right in kind of sharing, obviously, some of the Salvation Army's journey, and for each of us, we can all be guilty of this, and it is so easy for us as church leaders to slip into maintenance mode. Like there's been seasons, I'm sure, for many of us where that's the default. We just go back to, it's all too overwhelming. What have been some of the things that you have sought to implement, rectify, particularly as you're trying to return to movement, trying to move away from maintenance? What have been some of those things that they could be philosophically, they could be principles that you have sought to really integrate into leading this season?
Yeah, that is, I think, part of such a big picture. I really think the reality is, unless a church or an organisation sees a need to change, there's no reason to move out of maintenance mode. We just stay there. And I suppose for us, COVID was a catalyst. It stripped away all our rhythms, our programs, all the things that we've been comfortable with, and it just left us with God and a world in need. And that was like a huge wake-up call. But now, a few years down the track, the question is, do we slip back into maintenance mode, or do we keep pressing into God and listening for new things?
Yes.
And what is he doing through the church? Now, I think that's just going to take discipline. We really got to be disciplined and avoid looking for the silver bullet. Look for the deeper truth and take the metanoia journey of repentance, change, and seeking God. Doesn't all this sound so simple? But it's really, really hard. It's not just doing church, but it's being the church and living, breathing body of the church, and a living, breathing body, in maintenance. It's pretty boring. Like, it's not very fit. And I could sit here and tell you stories of this living out through wonderful ways like ping pong church or paddleboarding church or the coffee gang conversations or the knitting community that's evolving. There's all of these things that seem to be happening, but on their own, they seem small and insignificant. But actually, in the big picture, together, it's like a spiritual web across our organisation that can't be untangled.
Yes.
And there's this movement happening, and it's gaining momentum, and it's exciting, but it's all these little things that are happening together, and that brings the momentum.
Yes.
And the movement, and it gets us out of maintenance mode because we're thinking differently, we're trying new things, we're open to these exploring, pioneering people and organizational change to do that. And
yes,
it's lots of things.
Yes, and there needs to, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like there needs to be that culture of permission giving and innovation where those things are possible. Because if you're the only one who's given that a crack, or if you feel like the black sheep who's trying to do something a bit different, then that thing may not have legs on it, and yet it feels like there is a bit of an ecosystem rethinking of what's going on within the Salvos.
That's 100% correct. I think all the way from the top down, if you want to look, because we are a hierarchical, organisation, there has been a language, try something new, do something new, be innovative. You've got permission. That's definitely part of our, organisational vocabulary. I think that the struggle is for people at the front line is, what is the new? What does that look like? How do we do that? And that's where our team get to come in and our space get to come in and help them with a framework around that. And that's important, not just for the language to be there, but the tools and resources to be there to help people, because, we can talk a big game, but when you've been in maintenance mode for a long time, it's hard to come out of that. It's hard to find that one step forward. And so that's the privilege we get to do and journey in that space.
It's brilliant. Di, you've recently participated, you mentioned before, the Movement Leaders Collective, and obviously the work of Rich Robinson and Alan Hirsch, and a growing community of global leaders who are obviously passionate about this idea of movement. You were recently part of a gathering in London, which was really focused on creating that tipping point for movemental Christianity, particularly in the West. It's no surprise that much of the developing and Eastern world is flourishing when it comes to movemental thinking. And yet for us in the West, part of the challenge has been, as we've already talked about, is the institutionalization of some of our churches and denominations. What for you were some of the key takeaways from that experience, and some of the things that you both caught, you've implemented, you're seeking to help foster back here in Australia?
I don't even know how to describe that experience that I went through. I don't know if you've ever been in a room that's full of apostles.
Wow.
Like, there's something inspiring and chaotic about it. Like, seriously, it's like herding cats. It was just amazing. And a number of times Rich says, okay, you apostles, come on. Like, it was just, I don't know how to describe it. It was amazing. I remember, though, you know, the way they set it up is so beautiful that there's deliberate prayer pause times in between that, because apostles need to be, you know, come back. And one of the prayer times, just by myself and just sitting in that, you know, that sense of spirit that was happening in that place. And I remember opening my eyes and I really felt God say, I'm doing something new through my kingdom here on earth. And I haven't forgotten the Salvation Army.
Wow.
And
wow.
I was just like I feel I'm emotional even talking about it now, because it's such a powerful, and that was for me a tipping point in my life. And realizing that we are part of a much bigger tapestry across the world. It builds our network, but it helps our organisation see what God is doing and being inspired by that. And like, since being there, we've had our own gathering we had here, and we invited the New Zealand Salvation Army to come. So they're now on board with it. The Sweden territory are now on board with it. So there's this network within our Salvation Army organisation that's spiraling, because as we said before, I'm a bit of a talker, and I just like talk to people about what's happening, and suddenly it's just sort of happening across, you know, our organisation. And, you know, we can just lean into what God wants for the Salvation Army, but when you sit in those sort of spaces, you realise, like, you're not alone, and it opens up ways of thinking of working together as a global church, and not isolated believers, but faithful followers in Christ. And for me, it's also about making those deep spiritual connections with others to go on the unlearning and relearning journey, and be championing each other and growing together in the spirit. And like, if you think about that as a tapestry of the church across the world, it's just, you know, who doesn't get excited about that? Like, that brings movement in itself, you know. And so it's just such a unique space when people are really thinking about how to be the church in our Western world, to bring revival, to be obedient to the Spirit.
Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah. So I think for me it was a tipping point, but I didn't go alone. There was a couple of others that came, and for them that was a tipping point, and those connections met with other connections, it matched with other connections, and then we ran our own event. Like, I think it was 10 days after I got back from London, I ran my own national event with Rich in the room and Alan in the room. So it was like that domino tipped to that domino, which tipped to that domino. It was just amazing. It was just like, I'd love to relive June. It was just an amazing time, you know.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, hey, I'd also love to ask, because obviously I'm sure any re-engineering or cultivation of culture is never simple. It's always complex. It's sometimes there's opposition, sometimes there's complexities that you haven't considered. How have you been able to navigate that intersect? Because I'm sure there's probably leaders who are listening to this podcast going, oh, that all sounds great, and I'd love to be kind of have that level of freedom. I'm sure we're hearing the highlights here as well, Di. I'm sure there's been some days where you're like, this is too hard. But particularly for leaders who are really grappling with that complexity around how do they lead through this type of stuff, what would be your encouragement in that?
I'm going to say a few things around this. Firstly, I want to say that I'm not doing this on my own. I have the most fabulous team in the world, and they are amazing. And we have recruited another team of frontline leaders who are even more fabulous when all of us together create this sort of network. But I go back to, we can't lead someone to something we're not prepared to do ourselves. So we have to just always keep ourselves in check around that. But a good way I like to think about it is there's the center and the edge, the modal and sodal, if you know any of the language that we use. And my team and the team we're sort of raising up are kind of like the bridge builders. But I've thought about this a lot, and I really think we're more like the shock absorbers. Like,
wow, yes.
Let's just think about that analogy for a bit. And we are like, we've got the center and then we've got the edge, right? And our work is in that middle space of sort of they're bouncing off each other, and we're trying to, like, you know, not let them crash, but take some of the shock around that. And, you know, the center brings this deep theological insight and stability and history and, you know, resourcing. And then the edge brings the innovation and the new ideas that are bubbling up. And sometimes they can be at odds with each other. And that's where you got to do the work. That's where we sit to do the work, to lead in that change. And what we do is create language and understanding and connections, and that releases resources and empowers mission. But it has to be rooted in God. And because we don't want to do disruption for disruption's sake, because if there's disruption without bringing hope, it doesn't seem to be any point to that. Like, we really need to be in tune with God and make sure that the ultimate result of God's disruption is hope, is new life, is the gospel being spread. That's what we're called to carry into the world, not just to disrupt because we just want to tear this thing down. That's not the attitude at all. It is that we want to bring the new while honoring what exists and reimagining what exists to see a flourishing, you know, Jesus-centered community throughout the organization. And just some advice is you probably become a shock absorber. And that means just getting banged a bit, but you've got a purpose and you've got to stay true to that purpose. And, you know, if you do that really well, I mean, if you want to be a little bit less, you know, dramatic, a big bridge builder, you know, we use that language a lot, but you've got a purpose and know that purpose and know why you're doing it. And we're not just there to destroy. We don't want to, that's not the language at all. It is reimagining, you know, rethinking, renewal, all of those fabulous words. That's what we're doing, you know.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on to that, I think, in that space and just lead with people, find the like-minded people and build really good relationships with and have good communication with them and let them go. One of our officers, senior officers says, release the wild ones. So, like, release the wild ones, you know, and let it go. Word. Like, help them, release them and help them, you know, come to see their full potential. You know, if every believer just lived out their full potential, we wouldn't really even be having some of these conversations.
Yes. Yeah, it's good.
Imagine that.
Yeah. We just used a word there, Di, you know, obviously of renewal. And, you know, I think to wrap our conversation today, I'd love to just provide you the opportunity just to finish our time with a word of encouragement and for leaders, for denominational leaders, maybe others who are in similar types of roles to you, trying to work out how am I going to play my role in helping to be a part of God's renewal of the church in this season. And what have been your experiences? How would you want to encourage someone? Leave us with a parting gift of encouragement today.
Oh, geez. Okay. Hold on for the rider, don't give up is probably what I would say. But there is a move of God happening across the world.
Yes.
Note that. We cannot deny that. Note that.
Yes.
Our gathered worshiping communities will always have a place, and they are actually the foundation for a lot of this. But I want to challenge people to look beyond that and look to the fringes and look to the outskirts. God is doing something new. Church planting and pioneering and revival and fresh expressions of faith, they're going to come from the least expected places with the least expected people.
It's very good.
It sounds very biblical. And it will challenge some of our habits and shake our routines and push us out of our comfort zones. But that's where the Spirit's moving. That's where it's at. So be ready, do the work. It's long, it's hard, but it's worth it. And a big part is, remember, we are battling principalities and powers, not people.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, this work is costly. It costs personally. It costs emotionally. But again, I'll remind you, if we're faithful in the little things, God will do the big things with us. And gather your prayer teams. Find your innovators. Find your pioneers. Join in what God is doing. Be open. We use this phrase, have soft eyes and watch, listen, and step into adventure. Just don't look at everything so black and white. Be more open to what God might be doing and see what unfolds. And on a practical level, if you don't know where to start, read Rich's book, All Change. He'll love that. I've just done that. But, it's a good starting point to get your thinking about different things. But God is at work. Yes. And if you join him in that work, you just, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be great. I can sit here and say to you, I've never been more excited about the Salvation Army's place in the kingdom of God than I am right now when I look at the work that is happening at that frontline space. Sure, we've got, like everyone, we've got issues in lots of different places, but how exciting when we partner with God.
Yes. Yes.
Just find where he's at work and own that.
Yeah, it's great. I'm so encouraged. I think the way that you've been able to draw our attention and gaze to Jesus, what he's doing in the world. Yes, it's going to be costly. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but we need to look to the innovators, the pioneers. This is a moment for the church to really be the church and to do the Jesus stuff. And so I wanted to personally just thank you for taking the time. We're cheering on the Salvos. We're cheering on you as you lead that team. We're watching with great excitement because I do believe that you guys are modelling a new way. And so thank you for taking the time to share with us today. Oh,
that's really kind of you to say. Look, honestly, thank you for letting us have this space and share our story, because I think Salvos are a bit of an underdog, not always seen for its potential in the faith community, but we're there working away every day with everyday people, through everyday people, and letting God do his thing. It's great.
Yeah. Thanks, Di. Bless you heaps.
Thanks, Charlie. See ya.